My name is Dr. Sara Feldman. I'm board certified behavior analyst. I'm the director of provider engagement over here at Headstart Health. We're really excited to have you guys. I'm joined by two of my colleagues, Brianna Holm and Jenelle Wade, both BCBAs and directors here at Headstart Health. And we're going to dive into this concept of just retention and how can we work through that. And really, let's use some of these behavior analytics strategies and supports that we already know and we use with our kiddos and with our individuals that we serve really well, and apply it to RBTs. So we'll kick off with that. Again, if you guys aren't familiar with Headstart Health, we are a team of BCBAs who support other BCBAs to go independent. So we've started our own ABA companies, or we've supported in the building of some of the largest ABA companies out there. And really our MO is to help remove those barriers that keep BCBAs stuck and working in places that maybe don't necessarily align with their values. So we're really glad you're here. I can chat a bit more about what we do here at Headstart Health, but let's jump in and let's just start kind of talking through RBTs. When we think about any time, and I'm going to use RBTs as kind of a placeholder, but of course, this is BCBAs, admin, anybody who's really working in your team. There's a lot of questions that kind of come up with turnover. And the questions are, why are they leaving? And I'm not such a scary person. Why didn't they tell me? I could have fixed that. I don't know. Brianna and Jenelle, have you guys ran into that situation before where somebody leaves and you really thought we were on good footing and I thought we had rapport? Why not just tell me? And I could have helped
Absolutely.
fix
And I
it.
feel like it's always the person too that you think you have the best rapport with that will surprise you the biggest. And I think that, some of the things we talk about today is creating the systems where you can have those checks and balances for all employees, because I always say the person that you're not worried about is probably the one you should be worried about, and having some active conversations with them.
Yeah.
That's exactly where I was thinking, Brianna, is, typically the person who's doing really well, you might pull back from and distribute a lot more of your time and energy to somebody who's really struggling. So what it actually feels like is that person is getting a lot less support, right? And so it's counterintuitive, like, oh, they don't need me. They're so strong. They've got it all figured out. Well, that turns into other issues down the line. So it's definitely something you need to be constantly thinking about, is sharing the love and spreading the support and the supervision to everybody. So everybody feels supported.
Yeah, it's super humbling. I mean, I think I can hear my own voice in saying, well, if I'm not at your center, it means that it's not a problem. But that's not helpful for a high achiever or somebody who is craving mentorship and support. But that was my personal mantra for years. And it is, in my mind, I'm like, why do you need so much of me? I believe in you. Why can't you believe in yourself as much as I believe in you? And really, that's a very egocentric way of thinking through it all. And so we live and we learn. But when we think about turnover, really, if we wait and we monitor just that turnover data and that percentage, we're way, way, way too late. And so we think about leading indicators and lagging indicators. This is very much a lagging indicator. And so today is really about practical applied strategies that we can say with certainty that if you put in some of these measurements and the leading indicators and some of the efforts that we put into that, we can help affect the bottom line of that lagging indicator of turnover data. But what we can do is we can control the environments in which people exist. And so we can't make people, quote unquote, happy, which is, again, another rookie mistake of leadership and something I've definitely struggled with. But what I can do is I can control the environment in which the job is happening in. And I can do that with the best fidelity as possible, with the most effort that I have. And will it be perfect? Absolutely not. And I find myself saying to a lot of the owners here that we support at Headstart of it's successive approximations. Of course, eventually I want to have this like perfect place of we are going to pay for all of the admin time and we get to have all of these holidays. And sure, no such thing as cancellations. Those things are wonderful, wonderful, wonderful to get to, but there are successive approximations towards this larger end goal. And so how can we make sure with certainty that I'm putting forth my best foot consistently across all of the team members that I'm supporting? So when we think about turnover as that data point, here are a couple of things that I definitely notice in patterns of humans. One is, are the hours unstable? I am really kind of tired of this idea of, okay, it's ABA, there's turnover, hours are inconsistent. What doesn't need to be inconsistent is the communication we have during the onboarding process with our team members and our hiring process. And so if we do know for sure that hours are unstable, we need to make sure that we are reaching out to people and saying exactly what the job is. So if it's not a full-time position, and it's not always guaranteed to be a full-time position, we don't hire for that, because that disparity or, that disconnect between what I thought the job was going to be and what it actually ends up being is really what's that compounding factor here and point one. The other thing
and Sarah, sorry
yeah,
to interrupt.
no, go ahead.
I would even go as far as, a lot of BCBAs I've seen and I've talked to innately are people pleasers, right?
Mm-hmm.
They want to help people. They want to give people the yes. And it's so easy when you have a good RBT, BCBA in the interview process to want to tell them, I can guarantee you X hours in your first 2 weeks, because you are so excited about the potential partnership of working with that individual. You can see all of the great learning opportunities they're going to provide your clients. And you're like, I'm going to do whatever it takes to get that person, without taking a moment to pause to realize, what's my ceiling here with being able to actually provide guaranteed hours or X amount of hours in their first 2 weeks, because the likelihood is that ceiling's pretty low. There's not, to your point, there's not a lot of opportunity to provide exact schedules in our field. And by doing so, you're already starting off your relationship with this mismatch, or this like, I said one thing and now this is actually happening, which is going to snowball further down the line. And we'll talk about that more later. But I think that like something I see so often, they're like, but they were a great candidate and I wanted them. So I told them that we would give them 40 hours of billable. And I would be like, that's never going to happen. Now we have to go back and say, like, you agreed to this job with these expectations. And unfortunately, that's not something that's going to happen. And so I would always say, like, even if you're super excited about a candidate, make sure you're creating that pause in the interview cycle to make sure that what you are communicating is something you could actually hand them and consistently hand them going forward.
Yeah. And I think there's that level of like, we have to make sure that our needs are met. But I think on a base level, all of us in the EBA field right now are seeking some level of, and the word escapes me at this moment, but just some level of like legitimacy and authenticity of like, your word means something. And so if you say it, then are you going to do it? And from the, level of vice presidents and regional directors and things like that, we've felt that burn. We want we want to know that people are acting with integrity. That's the word. I knew it would come. But are you acting with integrity? Are you doing what you say you're going to do? And we feel that thread all the way through to RBTs and making sure that, you promised me the sun, the moon, and the stars, and you're not delivering. And every part of that starts to break down trust and belief in the ABA field in general. And so it's really important that even if I have a hard message to deliver, or it means that somebody's not going to stay with us, or they're not going to say yes to this offer, that we're operating in integrity, because this field is so small that it doesn't take much that eventually 5 years later, your company might be a multi-million-dollar amazing organization that has the foundation to do that. And you finally get to hire the person that you really, really wanted to, but you didn't burn the bridge by acting without integrity at the very beginning. So I love that, Brianna. I think that's a really, really good point. The other thing I notice is this is that idea of I'll come to your office if there's a problem, if something's burning down, then the concerns start to disappear. So I find the highest performing people, and Jenelle, I'm curious to know your thoughts on that, but the highest performing people are the ones that bring all of the concerns to you. They're pointing it out, they're noticing it, they're moving. And there's kind of two ways to think about it. One, this is driving me crazy. I notice it, and it's like you're looking in my underwear drawer and you're telling me the things that I'm not doing right. Like you noticed it. But the other way to think about it would also be this person's on my team and they're the extra set of eyes and ears that's going on. But figuring out a way to honor that person, I'm curious to know, like, what have you done in the past to kind of see there's always that person? Like, have you received them as the squeaky wheel, or have you thought about, like, was there a shift in that thinking for you?
Yeah. So because high performers like to get it right, right? And we already
Yeah.
know that. And it feels uncomfy sometimes to approach and try to help somebody who maybe isn't super open to it. So what I try to do instead is at the very beginning of a relationship, setting the expectations that I can trust you more the more you come to me, the more questions that you ask me, the more we can engage in this dialogue. I can extend more and more trust to you because I know you're going to ask if you're stuck. I know that you're going to ask if you're unsure. And so really reframing it as this is a trust building exercise when you come and ask me questions. This isn't highlighting I'm incompetent or I don't know what I'm doing or I failed over here. It really is you trusting me, coming to me, and we're able to have just a stronger relationship. So I have found that with high achievers, by framing it in that way, they actually come to me more often and point out more opportunities to improve and things of that nature, because it doesn't feel like it's their shortcoming, right? So this is an opportunity for us to grow our relationship.
Yeah. I think, I mean, there's a lot more to also of like, what do you do when you get that feedback from them? Do you feel like you need to be the people pleaser, or do you
Right.
feel like you need to say, you're right? But again, it's a successive approximation towards my ideal goal of being that employer. And so I'm okay sitting in the uncomfort of the undone. And that's also your point in which you get to have that moment of integrity. Are you going to overpromise something that you can't deliver, which is going to make a person feel like what they're giving is falling on deaf ears? Or can you say, yeah, that's not ideal, and here's the things that would need to happen before then in order for us to get there? It's a really careful place, and I've definitely botched both approaches for sure in my journey to try to become not a people pleaser. But it's just really natural. The other thing I notice is we make errors all the time, but people who feel safe to be able to say, hey, I forgot to turn the timer off on this data, or I forgot to clock out, or I did, something, I didn't write the session note, but here's whatever it happens to be. Those are things that when people are bringing those errors to you, it's a good sign. When people start to hide them, we think, what are they scared of? What's the consequence that they're scared of? And so, of course, I can't control that individual, but I can make sure that my reaction to being brought errors or different things is supportive and that they feel safe to do that. And so I think all of those things are stuff that I just start to wrap around. Those are key kind of leading indicators that help me go, okay, maybe turnover is going to start to happen. Of course, all of this doesn't work if there aren't kind of like two material kind of floors to all of this. We have, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. If a person is not working in a job that helps them pay their bills, and we don't have health and safety and, a resemblance of happiness, then there's no way that we're going to be able to perform in our job. And so some of those things are going to be that like we're going to have attrition because what the job offers and what this person needs to live their life don't align. But I beg of you at the very beginning of when you're offering employment to people that this is the opportunity for you to go back and say, hey, this is not the fit for you right now. And that's okay, because it's a dating process two ways. So material stability, we can avoid some of those issues by being really honest about the number of hours, how much can I pay, when to expect a pay raise and what does that look like. The other flip side is that psychological safety that goes into those three kind of points we had before, which is, do I feel safe to exist in this environment? And can I have a collaborative and cooperative conversation with my team member so that I can grow, I can change, I can get coached, I can provide feedback, and I don't have this fear of retaliation or what's going to happen. And I think we take psychological safety very much for granted. And that is definitely not something that's the responsibility of the employee. It's the responsibility of the employer at a certain point to create that environment. So, again, when we talk about those basic conditions, things like a livable wage, dependable hours, a workload fit that's realistic, and knowing what the clear rules, the operating rules. So if I do something, am I going to have this consequence? It's going to be the same thing that Brianna's consequence is going to be, which is also going to generalize to what is the family's consequence for not holding up their end of the bargain. So making sure that all of these are cared for before we start to think through leveling up the system there. And so when we think about psychological safety, again, it goes into that idea of, can I tell that truth? And so it's not necessarily that we're thinking about, a kumbaya environment of everybody is, crying and it's we're counseling, we're not mentoring. That's not at all. But that is feedback that I've gotten from high-level C-suite individuals that have said, I don't see the purpose of these 15-minute check-ins. It seems like it's therapy. I don't know, Brianna, when you do check-ins with your team members, and you're trying to create an environment of psychological safety, how do you defend that kind of argument of it's not therapy? They can go to a therapist, they can be counseled. There's a fine line between that. I always have a hard time articulating it over to people who are not drinking the Kool-Aid on this idea of psychological safety.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's two drivers from their point of view, right? And I actually similarly have been given feedback in the past that, you're not their mom. They can call their mom if they have grievances with their job. Like, you're not the one that should be fielding those conversations. And although I understand that I am not, there is a role that I need to make sure that I'm nurturing a relationship so that I understand what's happening. But I mean, the motivator here is this is a non-billable event, right? This 15-minute check-in is a non-billable event. And we know that's competing with the ability to go out and to see clients. And so what you want to be able to show and articulate is the return of the investment of those 15 minutes. And so if you can show, and this is super easy data to take, of just retention of employees once you've implemented a 15-minute check-in that is not at the end of the session, at the end of their day. You're not having this over the hood of a car as they're trying to go eat their dinner because they haven't eaten for 12 hours because they've been in sessions all day. This is a genuine stop, pause, conversation where they know what's expected of them. They know what to bring to the conversation. And although you're definitely including clients' progress, the focus isn't to discuss clients' progress. The focus is to discuss their progress. You will see that you can't save everyone. To say that you're never going to have someone leave, it's silly. It's not a goal you should set for yourself. That's like saying that all of your clients are going to graduate after 6 months of care. Like, that's just unrealistic. That's not individualized. But what you can say is that you have open conversations to know earlier when people are leaving, so you're not getting same day terminations, to know when schedule changes are happening earlier so you can plan ahead for scheduling changes, and also to know when caseloads are maybe unbalanced. And that was the biggest thing I took away from 15-minute check-ins is when, and Jenelle, you kind of spoke on this earlier, when the high-performing person has all of the high-intensity problem behavior clients as well because they rock star RBT or they're the rock star BCBA. And I'm like, wait a minute. This is not sustainable. And I had the ability before they burnt out to create some balance in their workload, to create some change because of that 15 minutes. And so if you're struggling with showing the proof point of these, what I would say is first, take the data. We all can take data and we can show. And second, tie that data to the return. So it's a 15-minute check-in, but I was able to actually make changes to a schedule ahead of time that saved us blank amount of hours because we knew about this ahead of time. And I think that when you're talking to the people who are less bought into maybe the, feeling side of culture, they understand that culture does impact the growth of the company. So figure out what's important to them, tie it all together, and present the data in that fashion. But also, as our business owners are growing, this is important for them to think about as well. Is the intervention that I'm implementing into my company giving me a return? Is there something that is helping the overall growth of my company? Or is this just a really nice thing to have, but it's not actually changing the outcomes that I want it to change? Because that will also happen when you're experimenting with culture interventions. I mean, there's times where I implemented things and, they actually cost a lot of money. And then looking back, I was like, okay, people enjoyed that, but it didn't actually change any of the outcomes I was hoping to change. They were just like, oh, that was a blip in the system where we were all really happy for 15 minutes. So it's important to constantly evaluate it in both sides.
Oh, that's so good. So good. Yeah. I mean, I think being able to know specifically and define what it is the intervention is, be able to break it down into its components, and then track the ROI on it. And then eventually, can we do a component analysis to figure out, are all of these pieces the most important or some of them? But that really, that's such a great call out there. Okay. So as we start to kind of think about, why are they not speaking up? Because I want to have these conversations. I want to help prevent. I want to be able to help. I'm not a horrible boss. I'm a really nice person, but I can't help you and I can't read your mind. And so we can break it down into really clear in, the ABCs, right? So when we think about the antecedents that are coming into why a person maybe isn't or is going to speak up, we can look at things like cancellation. Maybe there's some clinical issues that are going on, a really, really hard case. Maybe there's some level of unclear instruction. So maybe I was really rushed. There's things that are going on. Maybe I'm having some sort of workplace conflict with an employee, and or maybe the paycheck is completely different than what I expected it to be because of something, less hours, whatever it happens to be. The behaviors that we can track there are they asking a question? Are they reporting the concern? Did they name the mistake? Do they respectfully disagree with you? And then here's where we get to control, right? So the antecedent we can control when it comes to the system and process that's there, but life happens. And so sometimes there are events that happen that are beyond that. Their behavior is their behavior, but our consequence has to do with, do I hold space for them? Do I let them be able to vent? Am I trying to solve every problem for them, or am I giving them space to vent on those things? And I loved asking the question. This was way late in my career that I learned, are you calling to vent, or are you calling for problem to solve? I'm here to do either. But what I always do is I jump into man mode of let me solve that problem for you. And that's a lot of times not what people are asking for. And so the consequence there of how am I taking that? Other things to notice is what is showing up inside of you. And if you need to kind of do one of those ACT matrices to really figure that out, but is every time someone knocks on your door and says, hey, can we chat? As the supervisor, you are the supervisor, and your stomach drops, then what's showing up inside of you? And how is that informing what some of those conversations might look like? Because it could be that you are really living in that fear to please and want to make sure that, everybody is happy. And when you are wearing those rose-colored glasses and trying to make people happy, what you're not thinking about is how the system works together and what one decision here could affect all. And so it becomes more of a whack-a-mole. You're not happy. Here's my magic wand. Now you're happy. But then another person pops up, and we're not thinking in systems here. So,
and I think in addition to thinking in systems, it's important when people come to you with issues or problems, it's not personal. It's not saying, Sara, you are a horrible supervisor and that's why these problems are, or you don't care. I think a lot of people think it's because they think they don't care. And they're like, I care so much. And it's caring does not equal solution. This is not a personal thing towards you. You it's and looking at your systems. It's looking at holes and gaps in the systems that have been created. And depending on what environment you are in, you might have different levers at your disposal to being able to create the environment you want. But I think it's important, no matter where you are sitting, who's coming to you as the supervisor, it's not personal. So there's no need to be defensive. There's no need to try to push and say, like, this is why I'm doing it, or this is, just listen, just pause and listen. And to your point, like, create that peaceful environment.
Yeah. Janelle, I wonder, like, I always think that you handle situations like this so well because on one hand, you're such a girl's girl and you like, I feel like, you'll hold my hair, you'll give me space, you'll do these things. But then I also feel like you don't pick up the rope. It's not like not everything is necessarily worth solving. How do you balance those things of like holding space, but also some things that you can't fix? And not because you can't, but because they shouldn't be fixed. How do you process that?
Yeah, I think going back to kind of what you said first is every conversation is different and unique. You need to treat it as such, right? So when somebody enters your office, we need to talk, the standard phrase. I think we need to first identify, like, is this a crisis? Is this actually something that we need to drop everything and handle now? Is this a venting session? Is this an area of opportunity for growth for the organization? Like, are we just highlighting like a friction point in a workflow that we should keep our eye on? So really trying to gauge urgency and priority is first, right? So once you have a frame of reference of, okay, are something actually on fire, or we just need to have something on our radar, it's very easy to take next steps from there. I think it's really important as a really good supportive supervisor that you listen first, listen more than you are talking, because if they're coming to you, they're sharing something that they assume you don't know. So you really need to make sure that they are feeling heard in the moment. I always take extensive notes so that I can look back on them later because, I know they're laughing, but I do because, you're hearing it in the moment, but you're all, I like to reflect back on it later and really make sure that I understand the full concept. So typically when they're speaking to me, I'm actively taking notes, active listening. And then I always take a moment to pause and say, let me reflect that back to you to make sure that I'm understanding what the core issue is. Because sometimes what I'm hearing is not the actual problem they're bringing to me. They're like, no, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that. So I always make sure in the moment to clarify what is the actual problem you're trying to bring to me. And then from there, I'm very honest. I will say, thank you very much. Like, this is obviously a workflow that we could look into in the future. I'll keep you apprised as we are able to make some changes on that. But I'm not going to make false promises that, yes, we're going to go ahead and build this out in our portal tomorrow. And, so I think understanding the priority level and severity, really listening, trying to understand what they're bringing to the table, and then being honest about the follow-up piece. So is this something we're just going to take note of? Thank you for bringing this to my attention, and I will monitor as we go forward. Is this, I will get back to you by the end of the day, because this, I agree with you, this is a very severe situation, and I too take this very seriously. Or is this just a, glad that I could be here for you. If anything else like this comes up again, I'm here to vent, like more of a relationship, like holding space for someone. So I do think it's important that you address each individual situation individually, but that you're also honest about the outcomes of that conversation. That's what's really important. That's going to keep that trust. That's going to keep them coming back to you in the future, because they know that they've either A, got my back during a vent session, 2, they're going to take something to the finish line if it's urgent. They're going to solve this for me. Or 3, that they're just hearing me, that something is frustrating in how we operate, and it might be too big of a fix, but like it's on their radar. So the next time we can, adjust a workflow, we're going to start moving in that direction. So again, just feeling heard and being honest about next steps.
Yeah, that's perfect. I think the other thing I hear a lot in these conversations is, well, my door is always open. And that's great. But, whether you work in a remote environment, in a clinic, whatever it is, we don't know the learning history of individuals, and we don't know what their experience is with their supervisors, or if they don't have experience with supervisors, just with other adults in their community and environment. And so it's like, I literally lost all analogies, but like if you say that your door is open, it's not a system. It doesn't tell the person when to come to you, what's going to happen, what the ownership looks like. It's very much an inviting an opportunity for people to come in and just put monkeys on your desk. And so we have to shape what that looks like. How do we receive feedback? What's a good time period? Do we have, a saved moment? So, give a channel. This is not something that we're going to go in the all Slack channel and ask the question that makes you I'm really frustrated about this. What's the channel? Is it face to face with you? Is it on our one-on-ones? Is it via email? Whatever that looks like. Who needs to hear that information? So teaching to vent up or to, share your problems up, that's really, really important in such a high stakes teamwork environment. We can't say don't vent to your friends and your colleagues. That is what it is. I love that you have that community, but when we're looking to solve for a problem, we need to go up, and then we need to make sure that we have a plan to clock when I'm going to respond, and a way to close the loop on that. So it's a system, needs to be the same thing for every single person, regardless of the degree or severity. And so to kind of go into that a bit more, we want to make sure that if a problem's been brought up to us, that we are acknowledging it within 24 hours. So an email, a Slack, a call, whatever that is, I'm acknowledging it. I'm confirming the receipt. I don't need to solve it in that amount of time, but I am going to say, hey, thanks for bringing it to my attention. Here's what next steps look like. So within 3 days, I need to be able to communicate some sort of path. I can solve it, or I can't solve it, but here's who I've looped in to help me. This is a decision that is going to take a little bit longer. This was an easy thing, but I need to set the path of how are we going to think about that? And then within 10 days or so, I need to close the loop. Hey, we said this, here's what's happened. Even if you think that you have shared the outcomes in passing of hey, I got that taken care of, when you have your next time to sit down, that's a really good moment for you to have a very clear, open, and closure for the situation. This was the thing you brought up. Here's what I thought about, and here's how we handled it. Because you need to have some sort of punctuation on the sentence there. So we'll jump into kind of now that, you guys know we have that materials stability, we have psychological safety. These are areas that are going to be non-negotiables here. Next, we're going to kind of start to dive into what is the framework for thinking about all the other parts that go into retention here.
Yeah, so just to kind of carry off of what Sara said, once we have an issue and presented in front of us, or we have a team member that has come to us and said, I want to talk through this. I think it's important to recognize that there might not be clarity right away, but it's something that we're going to be looking for. And so, I always say it's a testament to what type of leader you are to where the clarity is. So if people are always coming to you and they're like, this is the problem and this is the solution I'm looking for, that's great. But also if they come to you with half-baked problems, hey, I'm starting to realize this is something that I don't have a lot of clarity on, that is a huge testament to your ability to meet them where they are in this problem-solving journey and get them to that finish line. And so, you have the foundation. Now you're starting to create some systems to being able to look at how you're going to solve these problems, or to Sara's point, how you're just going to close the loop to getting us to a solution eventually. Solutions do not need to come in 10 days. That is an unrealistic expectation. But just like when we are seeing a client not making progress, or we're seeing a parent not showing up to parent training, we don't wait until the end of the 6-month off to report out on those. We're not going to wait until a performance review to circle back to these problems or these issues that have arose. We're going to talk about them as soon as possible to nip them in the bud and to really create some control in a very uncontrollable environment. So you're looking for what success looks like. You might have to workshop that with the individual. You might have to say help. My favorite thing is, what does help for me look like? Ask that. Put them in the driver's seat. They're bringing this problem to you because let me tell you, the amount of times I've said a solution and they're like, wow, I don't need all of that. I was just looking for you to tell me that you're going to tell people about this. And I'm like, wow, I just created a 15-day process for myself that I didn't need to. So it's really important to incorporate that individual individual into the conversation to figure out what success looks like. And then like we're gonna go into these a little bit more, but just looking at the capability of the person, like, is this even possible? Are we promising the sun, moon, and stars, and like we can only give like rocks and pebbles right now? Because like there's a bit of a gap there. We should discuss that. So like we need to make sure that like we are doing a good gut check with ourselves and having a clear expectation. The consequence, what follows that? Is it going to be reinforcing? Is there going to be an access to reinforcement in general? Or is it going to be super punishing? And then what does the system look like? So the capacity long term, how are we going to make sure that we're moving into that super high psychological safety environment and really creating something that can be replicated? So your goal as a leader should be, okay, how do I take this problem and create a system so that when I have 50 of these conversations in front of me, it's not taking the same level of energy and attention for me to solve it. You don't want to be doing constant individualized solving because first off, as your team grows, that's just not sustainable and it will get exhausting for you. And you don't want it to seem like the first person problem you cared the most and the 30th person you don't care at all because you've seen it now 30 times. You want the system in place so that you can show the same level of care across the board.
Yeah.
So then just jumping in a little bit more, we're going to be looking at these, C's and really, Sarah, can we go to the next slide? Perfect. And looking at like what we can do as this kind of box or this table to look at, okay, what are the expectations I need to set? And then this is kind of feels like a broken record, but it's probably the advice we give the most frequent. It's just like, what is actually at your disposal to solve this problem? If an RBT comes to you, or even a BCBA who's hourly comes to you and says like, I need more hours, and you say, great, we're going to pay you for every day you're available, but you're not working. That's not actually a good solution because it's not sustainable. You're not setting the expectation that they need to be a part of the solution. You're basically saying like, I'm setting an unrealistic solution here and it's going to be a problem later on. And so when you're thinking about all of these different kind of examples or even like the framework of solving this, what I really challenge you to think of is the future you. Are you setting future you up for success, or are you just kicking the can down the road, so to speak, and later on you're going to have a bigger problem? Because that's really what the clarity piece is looking at. Are we setting expectations? Are we giving examples and creating rules that are going to be replicable and sustainable long term? Because if not, then you should maybe pause and reconsider. I will just say you will change. There were plenty of policies that I wrote that I was like, this is going to be the best policy for RBT cancellations, for example, that after like 6 months of it being in effect, I'm like, oh, we got to go back. We got to reiterate. And so don't worry about that so much, but really do try to think about all the different scenarios so that you're not reiterating every 2 weeks and rather you're getting something that's setting and playing for a little bit. I talked about the consequences a little bit, but we really want, just like our clients have a general understanding of like what is coming after their behavior. We're setting the environment up. Either we're creating a very consistent environment for them. We want that for our team members as well. We want them to know how to access reinforcement, when they're going to be getting feedback, if there's going to be a correction, what that's going to look like. And like my favorite thing to do about consequences with team members is to ask them, how do you want to receive these? It's a one question that changes the trajectory of your whole solution, because everyone likes to receive things differently. And, even though you might have the same problem across 30 employees or 30 team members, you might have 30 different ways that they want to receive their consequence. So just make sure you include that in the conversation, but clearly outline what the consequence is. Clearly outline what will happen when the behavior is observed. And then the next two are just really looking at the feasibility, not only for the individual, but also for the team where you're at. And so there are going to be times where the individual has the capability to learn this new skill. Maybe they have the prerequisite skills. They have the ability to do it. but you might not have the capacity to build it out. And so you need to make sure that you're having that conversation as well. Or it might be the inverse, where you actually have the capacity to build out this really great system, but the individual is not there yet. And so it's okay to say, like, hey, we have this roadmap on how to get promoted, on how to grow at this company, but this is where we're observing your skills. And so have that conversation with them, get them, because nothing's worse than somebody thinking that they are 2 steps away from getting something and they're actually 10 steps away from it because you weren't clear enough in your conversation. So really challenge you just to pause and think about each of these. They're not linear. You can kind of go back and forth through them. You might think you have clarity, and then as you start to get through the consequences, you're like, actually, now that I'm looking at consequences, I wasn't super clear about setting expectations, or like the rules and priorities that I needed to set do need to change. And it's okay to go back and reset those to kind of close this full loop. And some of these will not be a full closed loop. You'll kind of half close it and you'll monitor it, and it might open up more or it might close more depending on other environmental factors. But it's okay just to realize that it's not going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, done. The next thing that we really challenge is just like, and I know we keep saying this is like working with clients, but like our science is our science. You all know it. You can do it like the back of your hand. So just pause and remember that as well. But you need to diagnose before you choose the intervention. So you need to figure out why this is happening. What's the core reason for it? You know, what's the function of the behavior? Because if the intervention doesn't match the diagnosis, then we all know it's not going to work. And Sarah and I kind of talked about that earlier a little bit, of just like, sometimes you think like, oh, this is the solution, I'm going to do it. And it's like, oh, actually, that was way more, that wasn't needed. Or you're not even seeing the outcome you wanted to see, and you still maybe spent thousands and thousands of dollars creating this intervention. And so behavior is observable. Observe the behavior. Maybe sometimes too, the individual might come to you and they might think they've already diagnosed the problem. This is why treatment fidelity is important. You too should observe the behavior. You too should try to see what is happening in the environment and see if there's a conditional change occurring that like is a simple fix that maybe they don't even observe. So sometimes there's things going on in the environment that others won't observe, but when you're the outside looking in, you see it. And so take a moment, pause, look at that as well. And then look at the baseline. How often is this happening? I will say that most of the time when something's happening to someone, it feels like it's happening every day, 20 times a day, when in reality, it's probably not happening that frequently. It's like when you are talking to a caregiver and you're like, well, how often do they tantrum? And they're like, every day for 24 hours a day. And you're like, well, I've been here for 3 hours and I haven't seen a tantrum yet. So maybe we need to start taking some data to see what the actual baseline is. So collect the baseline, take the data, run with those 4 C's, see what you can find out about this problem, see what you can find out about a potential solution, and match the response. I think that's the best one we can say here is like match like the problem, the response of you and your leadership team needs to match the size of the problem. If this is a small problem, and actually Jenelle does this like phenomenally every single day, like her ability to like look at problems, categorize them, and then deploy resources as needed is like just truly amazing to watch. You need to make sure we're matching the response of the problem. And then just like anything else, is your intervention working? Look at the data long term. See how it's going. You'll likely need to make tweaks. There's going to be new environmental changes that occur. It's truly like a treatment plan that constantly has new variables added to it day over day. And you have to roll with the punches, but you know your science and you know how to take data. So fall back on that and look at that when things just feel like nothing makes sense.
Yeah.
We're going to go into...
We can kind of zoom through these probably.
I was going to say, we have some more slides, so maybe go through these ones really quickly.
Yeah. So we'll leave these in here. These are a bit more of just a good operational definition of each of the 4 C's. Brianna covered it really, really beautifully there, but these are some good tactics that you guys can go back and take a look at. But here's some good applications. So let's jump into an application.
Okay, so now that we understand the retention formula, right? So let's apply the formula to a really common scenario. So I know that we have a lot of clinicians on this call, so we've all had that moment where we notice an RBT becoming a little bit quieter, declining those extra shifts, or hey, do you want to sub over here, submitting later and later and later notes, requiring so many more prompts and reminders, asking for fewer cases or to be pulled off of cases. So I think we all can relate to one of those aspects. And it might be tempting to conclude in those moments, well, they've just checked out, like this being like an attitude problem or like something wrong with them. But I would just urge all of us in those moments, those very common situations that we'll continue to find ourselves in, to just remind ourselves that that is an assumption and not yet a diagnosis.
Yeah, a big pet peeve of mine, Jenelle, is when people are like, oh, well, that person's just burnt out. And I'm like, okay, well, that's interesting. That's a really big word and statement. And what does that mean? And it means something different for every person. And so when we give this like terminal label on a person based off of the topography of their behavior, and we don't dive into what it actually is, it's really shooting us in the foot because it tells us basically nothing is solvable.
Well, it's also when people just say like turnover is high in ABA, so you need to expect it. It's like, well, if I create a self-fulfilling prophecy, then like, yes, everyone will quit, but maybe I should look at my systems and culture before I just say like, oh, they quit, RBTs quit, or BCBAs quit. They leave all the time.
Yeah,
absolutely. And so we're here to say that we don't have to just say, oh yeah, our retention's really hard in ABA. We're saying you can use the 4 C's. So when we examine the situation through the lens using those 4 C's, we see a more complete picture, something that we can act on in those moments, something that gives us agency. So in this situation, the RBT has the clinical capability, but the expectations are inconsistent. Prior concerns have not been resolved, and cancellation and documentation demands are creating a lot of instability. So there is not consistency across the board there. Those are all kind of glaring at you, right? That those are all things that we should be addressing. So this tells you that our very first responses should be to address that clarity component, those consequences, and capacity. Again, this is telling you right out the gate that this is not an RBT attitude problem or something wrong with them that we need to adjust. So we keep going back to the same thing, that our intervention should always match the evidence. So, using those 4 C's to your benefit, really gathering the information to understand what's going on. We can establish then, one clear coverage and documentation expectation, provide that clarity for them, acknowledge and start closing those loops. We've talked about that quite a bit on how to do that and how frequently to do that with folks, and really try to stabilize their paid hours and documentation time. So in this situation, we should not try to retrain someone, because in this situation, that was not identified as one of the skill deficits. So going back to what Brianna said, in that one example, she spent all this time working up a solution for something that didn't really exist, or maybe it was bigger than the situation had demanded. So in this situation, if we spent a whole week on retraining, that's not going to resolve what's actually going on here with this technician. So then the next step here is turning that response into a repeatable policy. So great, you did it one time, you saved this one technician. Excellent. But in this situation, so here, we'll use an example. So when a client cancels with less than 24 hours notice, eligible time could, right? So other opportunities could be converted into approved training time, documentation, material preparation, or other coverage like subbing plans and things like that. So this is an example of a policy that would clearly be identifying the action, the owner, the response time, and a measure of success. So again, when you're approaching all of these situations and you have a successful closing of the loop, like with the example we showed prior, then this is an example of how to turn a consequence or your response into a policy. So like what Brianna was saying before, this becomes the response, right? So you're responding in the same way to every person, and the first person doesn't get the best outcome versus the 30th person who brings this across your desk. Okay, so cost, there were a couple mentions throughout about, there was a little talk about it's expensive, having turnover is expensive. And so one of the things that everybody should be paying attention to is that retention decisions have a very serious financial impact. This is a very lengthy example that shows how costly it actually is on how to replace an RBT. And so this is suggesting that it could be more than $5,000 once you take into account recruiting, onboarding, reducing training, the vacancy time. So that's a loss of billable hours, right? Schedule rebuilding, and just reduce productivity overall. So this exact number obviously will vary. But the point here is that turnover is a cost in itself and extends far beyond just what it costs to hire on and train a new RBT. So when we compare the costs here of providing limited hour stability, for example, that may be less expensive than actually replacing an entire employee. So in this example, we have given a full year of cancellation related hour top-ups, which cost $3,400 about for that team. And now if you compare that with the cost of losing a technician, which is about $5,300 for one departure, really in this situation, avoiding one departure could roughly fund about 80 weeks of those hour top-ups. So engaging in other ways and having different interventions that might on the surface look to be an expense, right? That would be one of those, dollars well spent because you are avoiding this possible turnover, which is actually more costly at the end of the day. Okay, measure before people leave. I mean, we cannot say this enough. Like, we need to get ahead of the game. We should not be hearing about things in exit interviews. We should not wait for turnover data to tell us that there is a problem or what the problem is. A meaningful retention dashboard should be able to track all of the conditions that our employees experience. So we should be regularly looking at schedule stability. So how often are those scheduled hours actually delivered? That is a financial impact that is telling you the financial impact that your team is experiencing. Whether concerns are resolved. So if you have some sort of ticketing system or mechanisms where concerns are raised, how often are we able to close the loop? Do you have NPS scores for your internal team members that they're able to share how they're feeling within the culture and the community? Quality of supervision and support. There's a variety of ways that you can assess for this across the board. And then obviously just tracking retention. So if you're not actively looking at one or all of these, you're really cutting yourself short. There is a lot of data that you could be reviewing on the regular that will put you in a position of power to take charge before these things creep up on you. And these are all leading indicators listed here on the slide that allow us to intervene earlier. That's the takeaway here. So in closing, retention is not a campaign or a one-time initiative. We've all seen, different slogans out there, or, companies citing, different data. But really it is the system that employees actually experience day to day. We've given lots of examples of what it feels like to be under a supportive boss, for example, or to be heard or to be valued or to have psychological safety. So if you start with the situation rather than labeling the employee, you examine each of the 4 C's that we've gone through extensively today. You intervene where the evidence actually points to or tells you is the actual problem, and then measure those conditions long term, then you're going to really position yourself really well as an organization. And so the question that we will wrap with today and leave you all with is, what is one contingency that you believe that you can redesign this week?
Yeah, I'd love for you guys to throw that into the chat. And really, I think it's very easy to look at all of these situations and think, oh my gosh, there's so much I need to do. But it's one thing. Pick one thing, do it really, really well, continue to do it for 30 days, and then stack habits on top of it. Don't try to bite off the entire thing at the same time. So drop that into the chat, you guys. What's one thing that you're going to kind of take away and see what contingency will you redesign this week? And so while you guys are dropping that in here, I'd be remiss to not point out just what we do here at Headstart Health. Again, we help BCBAs go independent without being overwhelmed. We want BCBAs to be able to go and support their local communities, be able to own their own independent ABA organizations, be truly clinician owned and clinician led. That's why we do what we do. And so here at Headstart, we equip our team with, or the companies that we support with, the clinical software they need to be successful, all of the insurance management and support that goes along with it. You guys have BCBA CEUs designed specifically or for, business owners. And then, of course, there's the clinical mentorship that goes along, not only from just that ABA business boot camp that we have at the beginning, but ongoing training and developmental support there. on top of client intake, acquisition, RBT recruitment, and really so much more. So we're really here to make sure that we support BCBAs to go independent, but to do it with confidence and a backing of a real BCBA team behind them that's done this before. So really appreciate you guys' time today. I really love seeing what you guys are going to take along with you. So it looks like one contingency that we're going to tackle moving forward is focusing on transparency of the job, the tasks and the compensation piece. Yeah, to be clear is to be kind. And really, that takes a lot of bravery to do that too. And so I love that. Really, really good. Not waiting for the feedback, scheduling it, and then listening first. We're seek to understand first. And then that last RBT's concern, make sure that I'm responding to them with all the same effort and energy. And really, the only way you could do that is to give yourself grace and to have the time in order to process through that and to think through that. So I love that, Lauren. You guys are going to get this CEU slide deck in your email. So with the same email that you registered for here, you can scan this QR code. I just noticed CEUs will be available till 12/31/2025. That was last year. You'll have CEUs available until 8/31/2026 for this one. So this link will stay live, but please go ahead and fill out that survey for us and we'll send you over your certificate within the week or so. If you guys have any questions, anything at all, we'd love to connect with you. You guys have our socials on here. Be sure to follow us, and we'd love to also connect with you guys on LinkedIn. So thanks so much for being here, and we'll see you next time.